Imagine walking into a history book and seeing Henry I, Henry II, all the way up to Henry VIII. Then you hit the Edwards, and suddenly you're at Edward XI. It sounds like a glitch in a simulation, or a complete lack of creativity, right? Why on earth would a kingdom name its leaders the same thing over and over again for centuries? Is it just laziness? Or is there a deeper, more calculated reason behind these repeating names? When we look at the long lineage of British monarchs, the repetition is staggering. But this isn't an accident. In the world of monarchy, where power is passed down through bloodlines, identity is everything. To understand why names repeat, we first have to understand the regnal name, or throne name. This is the official name a ruler adopts the moment they take power, and surprisingly, it doesn't even have to be the name their parents gave them. From the Pope in Rome to the pharaohs of Egypt, the act of choosing a name is a powerful political tool. So, let's get into it. All right, first things first, let's get the basics down. What exactly is a regnal name? Simply put, a regnal name, or a throne name, is like a professional stage name that a ruler adopts the moment they take power. This name doesn't actually have to be the name their parents gave them at birth. Think of it like changing your username or creating a new personal brand when you start a big new job. A perfect example is Queen Victoria. Her birth name was actually Alexandrina Victoria, but when she ascended the throne, she had total freedom to choose. She could have been Queen Alexandria, but she chose Queen Victoria for her own personal reasons. But if there are a bunch of kings using the same name, how on earth do we tell them apart? That's where the regnal number comes in, those Roman numerals you see at the end of their names. The purpose is simple, to keep things from getting confusing. Imagine if there were 8 different kings named Henry ruling one after another, but without numbers. Historians, and all of us trying to learn history, would be absolutely losing our minds trying to figure out which Henry we're actually talking about. Interestingly, the number 1 or the first is often only added after a second ruler with the same name takes the throne. Take Queen Elizabeth I, for example. While she was ruling, people just called her Elizabeth of England. The I only became a standard part of her title once Elizabeth II took the throne in 1952. And just so you know, this tradition isn't just a thing in Britain or Europe. In the Vatican, the Pope does the exact same thing. When elected, a pope almost always leaves their birth name behind to choose a new one. For instance, Pope Francis was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio. The only difference is that in the papacy, some names are intentionally avoided out of respect. For example, no pope has dared to use the name Peter I because that name is reserved to honor Saint Peter, the very first pope in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. So, if you're a royal and you've just been crowned, how do you actually pick your name? You can't just flip a coin or pick something random from a baby name website. Generally, monarchs follow one of 3 main paths. This is the most common and straightforward route. Most rulers just stick with their first baptismal name. For example, when Queen Elizabeth II took the throne in 1952, she was asked what name she wanted to use. She simply replied, "Of course, my own name," and chose Elizabeth. Easy, right? But some royals like to mix it up. They might pick a middle name they've always preferred. Remember Queen Victoria? As we mentioned, she dropped Alexandrina and chose Victoria because that was the name she preferred since she was a child. Then you have King George VI. His birth name was actually Albert Frederick Arthur George. He could have been King Albert, but he rejected that, choosing George instead to honor his predecessors. This path is all about power, legitimacy, and branding. By taking the name of a great ancestor, a ruler is basically telling the world, I am the rightful heir to this greatness. It's a way of saying, if my grandfather was a legend, then I will be a legend too. We see this clearly with the sultans of Yogyakarta, who have used the name Hamengkubuwono for generations, using those regnal numbers to keep the line clear. It happened in ancient times too. In ancient Persia, Artaxerxes took the throne name of his father and grandfather. He wasn't just picking a name, he was signaling that the stability and strength of the previous era would continue under his rule. Now, this is where things get intense. Some rulers choose a completely new name to create a specific image, usually one of religious power or absolute fear. Take Abu al-Abbas from the Abbasid dynasty. He chose the throne name al-Safa, which literally means the bloodshedder. Now, that's not exactly a friendly name, right? But that was the point. It was a psychological weapon, a warning to his enemies that he was ruthless and powerful. On the flip side, you have Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. Before becoming emperor, his name was Ras Tafari Makonnen. But in 1930, he chose the name Haile Selassie, meaning power of the Trinity. As a devout Christian, he wanted to signal that his position wasn't just a political win, it was a direct mandate from God. This choice was so powerful that it eventually became the cornerstone for the Rastafarian movement in Jamaica. So, whether it's for simplicity, legacy, or pure intimidation, the name a ruler chooses is the first big statement of their reign. Now, we've talked about the glory and the strategy of picking a name, but here is the dark side. In the royal world, there are names that are effectively retired. Not because they're out of style, but because the previous person who held that name was such a disaster that no one wants to be associated with them. Welcome to the royal blacklist. Take the name John, for example. In English history, the name John has a terrible reputation. Enter King John, also known as John Softsword. This guy was a walking catastrophe. He was cruel, he was cowardly, and he managed to bankrupt the entire country through his own ego. He was so hated by his own people that they eventually forced him to sign the Magna Carta, the famous document that basically told the king, hey, you aren't above the law. Because King John's reputation was so toxic, a silent rule was established. For over 800 years, not a single English king has dared to use the name John. It's as if the name was permanently banned from the royal directory to avoid bringing back memories of a failed reign. But the curse of a name isn't just a thing of the distant past. Fast forward to September 2022. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, her son, Charles Philip Arthur George, became the heir. Now, before his coronation, royal experts and historians were actually speculating, will he change his name? Why? Because the name Charles carries some serious trauma in British history, specifically Charles I. He was the only English king to ever be publicly beheaded. He was known as a ruler who spent his time partying and neglecting his country, and his reign ended in one of the most dramatic ways possible. For a while, people wondered if the new king would switch to King Philip or King George, just to distance himself from that dark association. While Charles III ultimately decided to stick with his birth name, the fact that people even asked shows how much power a name can hold. It just goes to show that while a name can give you legitimacy, it can also be a burden. No ruler wants to start their reign in the shadow of a curse or the ghost of a failed predecessor. In the end, if a name is broken in the eyes of the people, it stays buried in the history books. So in the end, picking a throne name is all about balancing the past with the future. Whether they're doing it to look more powerful or just to avoid a family curse, these names aren't just labels, they're a message. From the ancient pharaohs to the modern British royals, their names tell us exactly how they want to be remembered. Now, I have a question for you. If you suddenly became a king or queen, would you keep your own name, or would you pick a cool new throne name to create a certain vibe? Let me know in the comments. And, as always, see you in the next one.